Summer, Sunday morning, page 75. Saturday morning I went to confession, and at night I took a bath. Mom filled the tub, and we filed in like the animals on Noah's Ark, 2 at a time, so she would scrub us clean. All this was because of Sunday. Sunday meant clean ears and wool pants, white shirts and ties, jackets and dresses and shiny shoes. Sunday meant church. I knew that going to confession and church was a way to cleanse my soul, and it was important to have a clean, sin-free soul if you hoped to go to heaven, but church was important for another, more practical reason. If we behaved at church, if one of us didn't poke out somebody's eye while we were driving home, Dad would stop at Leo's Bakery for a dozen donuts. And Leo's lemon-filled donuts were so delicious that people traveled from far away to buy them. But going to church in Marshfield got a lot more complicated in the summer. Tourists swelled our town from Memorial Day straight through to Labor Day. Streets, stores, churches were a lot more crowded. One morning we showed up for the 9:30 Mass to find our church packed, every seat taken. Jimmy groaned. I looked at Dad and Mom. What were we going to do? Go home and come back for the 11 o'clock Mass early enough to get a proper seat? Not likely. What would we do at home for an hour and a half sitting around in our best clothes? How could we possibly keep them clean? I knew the bottom line. If you were there on time, it counted for your Sunday Mass obligation, even if you didn't actually get a seat in the church. There was no choice but to wait with other latecomers by the open door outside the church. So we stood, all 9 of us, outside the big church door. Dad slipped through the crowd and ducked inside. I knew he would whisper a few quiet words with the ushers and leave a small stack of quarters on one of the felt-covered tables at the back of the church. I wished I could go in with him. It was hard to hear what the priest was saying. In fact, it was impossible to hear more than the sound of droning words, the occasional tinkle of bells on the altar, the rustle of people's best clothes as 200 people all stood, sat, or knelt, with no pews to corral them and no altar to focus their attention. My brothers and sisters showed no interest in what was going on inside. Outside the church, they had no fear of God. Jimmy and Elaine began a contest to see how long they could balance on one foot. Tommy was hard at work bothering some ants. Bobby and Johnny were ripping pretend farts by blowing into their hands, much to the delight of Joey, the baby. "Lemon donuts," I reminded my brothers and sisters, but they ignored me. When Mom saw what the kids were doing, she fiercely snapped her fingers and fired a stern look at them. She grabbed Tommy and Bobby and pulled them close to the church door. For the next 45 minutes, she kept doing that, rotating kids close to the open door of the church so we could each get our dose of the churchy sounds, smells, and action. Honestly, it seemed pretty pointless to me, standing there in our best clothes. I mean, the priest couldn't even see us. But when it became clear that we weren't going to leave, I realized that there was nothing to do but lean toward the open door, try to listen, and breathe in the incense smell wafting out into the June morning. It was a perfect Marshfield morning, sunny and warm. The air had a salty tang that tasted like the ocean. At this time of day, it would be so beautiful at the beach. My wool pants were starting to itch, but I thought about Leo's Bakery and tried to hang in there. I had Jesus on the inside, sweet summer outside, and the possibility of some heavenly donuts not too far down the road. Last kiss, page 81. Mom and Dad always kissed us goodnight before we went to bed. Mom kissed my right cheek, Dad my left. After that, I got under the covers, and it was an easy glide to sleep. These kisses were a regular part of the bedtime routine, like brushing my teeth, having the nightly bowl of cereal, or hearing a story before lights out. It felt like having air to breathe, or a blanket to keep me warm, automatic, and I never gave it a second thought. One night I finished my bedtime bowl of cereal and went to Mom. "Sleep tight," she murmured, kissing me on the cheek. "Night, Mom." I found Dad sitting at the desk in his office. "I'm going to bed," I told him. "Well, good night." And to my great surprise, he reached out and shook my hand. At first, I just stood there, confused. Finally, I took his hand and shook it the way I'd seen men shake hands. "Sleep tight," he said. Then he turned away from me and went back to his paperwork. Feeling a little bit more surprised than hurt, I headed off to bed. Next night, I gave it another shot. After eating my bowl of cereal, I went to Mom. She kissed me and gave me a big hug. That built up my courage before I went to my dad. I found him out on the driveway. He was packing the trunk of his car, getting ready for a business trip. "Hey," he said, straightening up. "Bedtime?" "Yeah." I moved toward him. "Good night." He wrapped his arms around me and gave me a bear hug. "Night." My voice was muffled against his chest. He released me and went back to packing the car. For a few seconds I didn't move. The night was warm. Fireflies were out, floating on the evening breeze. They made me think of the jellyfish Dad and I saw one night about a year before we were on a dock at the beach. I noticed lights flickering in the dark water and was amazed to find out that they were living animals. How can they light up like that? I had asked my dad. They make their own light, he explained, like fireflies. How do jellyfish move? I asked him. Do they have fins? No, said Dad. But what if they want to see their friends? How do they get there? They drift in the tide, Dad explained. If you're lucky, the tide will help them drift to where they want to go. What if they want to see their friends, but they're not lucky? He shrugged. Then I guess they drift away from each other. 2 more times I went to Dad for a goodnight kiss. No luck. I finally gave up. Mom still kissed me goodnight on my right cheek, but somehow it just didn't feel the same. Her kisses didn't have the safe, solid feeling they'd had before. I laid in bed trying to figure it out. Even though I was confused, one thing seemed clear. My father and I had drifted away from each other in a small but important way, and a way that I couldn't explain, not even to myself. Friends, age 10, page 85. Andy Hunt lived next door. I loved the way his eyes crinkled up when he heard something funny. When Andy laughed, the whole world lit up, like the sun coming from behind a cloud. His black hair hung straight down, and he'd shake water out of it like a wet dog. After we went swimming, every day I knocked on his back door or he knocked on mine. If he wasn't home, I'd wait for him outside, and it seemed like forever until the Hunt's car finally pulled into the driveway, and Andy ran over to play. Steve Fishman lived on a small farm that was visible from our house, though you had to cross Route 3A to get to it, and that was a busy road. He was one of the only Jewish kids I knew. The kitchen in his house had a wild, spicy smell that I loved. Steve and I played music in his room, fooled around with his father's barbells, and talked endlessly about a girl we both loved. Mr. Fishman was strict. Steve had an unbelievable number of chores to do before he could play with me. I helped him so he'd get done faster, but sometimes Steve ran off before his chores were finished. When that happened, his father always found out and sent Steve to his room. Mr. Fishman never told me I had to leave, but with Steve in his room, there was nothing for me to do, so I'd get on my bike and ride home. I took it hard whenever my friends got punished. It felt like I was getting punished too. Larry Waters lived down the street in an old farmhouse that had all kinds of attics, tool sheds, root cellars, workshops, garages, haylofts with real trapdoors, barns, and even an underbarn. It was the perfect house for playing hide and seek, or war. I loved going over there. There were 10 kids in Larry's family, and his house was always jammed with toys. Larry had a Milky Way of freckles and a mane of red hair, and he was the strongest kid I knew. I guess he'd been toughed up from the pounding he got from his big brothers, but those brothers passed down some great-looking sweaters to him, and Larry ranked us out for the pitiful clothes we wore. He had style, and he could curse like nobody's business. When he opened his mouth, a fantastic flood of swears would come spilling out. I don't mean 1 or 2, I mean a whole stream of interconnected curses. And Larry was funny, too. One of his commercials on TV had a jingle that went like this. "My advice, sir, get de-ice-er." Larry preferred to sing the song this way. "My advice, sir, treat my friends nicer, or you'll get a big fat lip... ... The 4 of us, Andy, Larry, Steve, and I, were all in the same grade. We called ourselves the Four Stooges. With my brother Jimmy, I spent most of the time in the woods, climbing trees, exploring, looking for stuff. With my friends, I spent more time inside, talking and trying to crack open the great mysteries. Death, God, girls. One day, we talked about kissing. "Thing is, you don't just kiss her quick and then it's over," Larry said. "Yeah," Andy agreed. "What do you know?" Larry shot back. "Your ma's the only girl you've ever kissed." Laughter. "Kissing takes a long time," Larry continued. "One kiss might last 5-10 minutes. Pause. "Yeah?" Steve put in. "You gotta hold your breath." "Tough luck, guys," Larry grinned. I leaned back and loudly cracked his knuckles. "I can hold my breath 15 seconds longer than any of you jokers, so when it comes to kissing, I'll be king."